Eric Anderson, many of you know me as Ebony Blade, New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame member, former wrestler. In my regular life, I serve as a lawyer. I have a practice that is based out in Southern California, in what's called the Inland Empire, Redlands, California. And we've opened up a second office here out in Massachusetts, which is actually a totally separate law firm that deals with one major practice area for us that we call sin law. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on. First of all, one of the reasons why we wanted to do this particular kind of presentation is a lot of people have forgotten or are unaware that wrestling and the law have a very long and interconnected history. And many times people have forgotten, whether it's fans, whether it's promoters, whether it's wrestlers, whatever it is, that there are always a legal ramification to what's going on. Now, when Joe Bruin and I spoke last year about me doing this presentation this year, at the time we thought that one of the most important things to talk about was essentially going to be what wrestlers and promoters should know and what fans should never forget. And part of that we thought at the time was going to be dealing with issues of intellectual property, issues of liability, and the like. For example, one of the things that thought would be important is wrestlers becoming, understanding what it means to own your gimmick. And when I say own, I mean to truly own your gimmick. But something has occurred recently that's kind of changed where we're going to focus today. So at the tail end, I'm going to talk about what is called the Dynamex decision. Now, the Dynamex decision is addressing the issue of what makes an independent contractor. Now, many of you are aware, of course, that in almost every single promotion, wrestlers have always been designated as independent contractors as opposed to employees. Now, for those of you who don't understand the difference, you may have heard often people referred to as a 1099 employee. That is somebody who's an independent contractor. An employee versus an independent contractor has a variety of ramifications. First of all, when one is an employee, the employer is now accountable for a variety of employment taxes, unemployment taxes, Social Security, in some cases disability, in some cases retirement. All of those are major factors, and one of the reasons why for years wrestlers were called independent contractors is because for the most part, they really were. They came in, they worked for a promotion for a period of time, they were free to stay, they were free to leave, it all depended. All of this, of course, changed as the WWE began its massive expansion. Because what it did was it started taking control of these people. You also started to get exclusive contracts to show up. Having seen a few of these contracts, and this has been an argument for a long time, the question's been raised as to whether or not wrestlers in certain promotions, and certainly at the top of the bill is the WWE, are actually independent contractors, or whether they are employees. For years, the WWE has stated that they are employees. And for years, the WWE, for all intents and purposes, has been lying. We know it, they know it, the government knows it. One of the reasons why, of course, is because the WWE employees, the performers, the wrestlers in and out of the ring, do not have the ability to control, A, what it is that they're presenting, that is controlled by the company. They are not free to work elsewhere without permission. In fact, with WWE contracts, many of these people can't even do interviews without permission from the WWE. They no longer have control in many cases of the names they themselves have created. And based upon this, and this massive control that the company has, they should be falling under the various employment laws of each and every state. So you may be thinking, what does this have to do with Dynamex? We're going to get to that. Dynamex is a California Supreme Court decision which is now established in California. What the rules are for determining what makes someone an independent contractor. The ABC rule. If all of these things are met, then that's going to determine what is an employee versus an independent contractor. First of all, do they have control over the nature of their work? Okay, where they do it, how they do it, etc. An independent contractor would have that. An employee would not. Secondly, is the work being done by the independent contractor, or the alleged independent contractor, is that within the core established business nature of the parent company, or those who are seeking the services of the contractor? Let's use the WWE for example. First of all, World Wrestling Entertainment. This is where you could find the possibility of being hoisted by their own petard, as we say. Because the WWE says that it is what? It is an entertainment company. If it is an entertainment company, then everybody who appears for them would be an entertainer. So the core business of the WWE is entertainment. And the people who it is hiring to do this work are doing entertainment work. Are you following along with me? What this therefore means is under Dynamic's decision, under that scale, they most certainly are involved in the core business of what the WWE does. Now, let's look at the third phase. The third phase is, does the contractor essentially control a business outside of this entity that addresses the same issues? And the answer to that, of course, is no. It does. The answer, in many cases, would be no. But here with the WWE, we know that these people do not have the site licenses because they can't. They're contractually obligated to not provide their services to any place else but the WWE, so long as they're under contract. By doing this, Dynamix has now converted a variety of people in California from independent contractors to employees. So, for example, barbershops. Many of you have gone to barbershops, I would hope, at some point, and got the haircut. Well, the question is the barber at the barbershop an independent contractor or an employee? For the longest time, the thought was that they were independent contractors, that they were leasing an area, they were leasing a booth of some kind, or a seat. And while leasing that particular area, they would then be providing a service. But what Dynamix does, Dynamix then says, well, wait a minute. If the purpose of the barbershop is to be engaged in grooming, and if the individual there who is renting the space is involved in grooming, then they are therefore an employee. Now, your next step may be, okay, well, what does that have to do with the WWE right now, and what does it have to do with wrestling in general? Well, I'll tell you. First of all, the state of California is now seeking a bill in the state legislature now that is going to codify. It's going to codify the Dynamix decision. Now, let me explain to you what we mean by codify. Courts make decisions all the time. They make rulings all the time. But one thing about when a court makes a decision is another court can come along and change it. But once you've established it as a code, once it is part of the labor code, once it is part of the penal code, once it is part of the code, now it takes an act of the legislature to change it. Why this will be a problem, of course, is every single business that comes into California must then abide by those rules. Which would mean that if it is determined that your business and those people who you call independent contractors are actually employees, it means that every time you do business in the state of California, you are going to have to treat them as employees. Unemployment insurance, Social Security taxes, and in California, of course, possibly health insurance. And there are a variety of other rules. The other thing is, once you're an employee, you then fall under as well OSHA. OSHA will also become an issue. You'll have the employment development policy. Are you starting to see, keep in mind, what was the number one thing Vince McMahon wanted to do when, years ago, I think 1984, 85, when he came out in New Jersey and said wrestling is just entertainment? What was the biggest reason for that? That's right, to not be regulated, to lose the taxes. It of course now means now when they pay these guys, they get into the 1099s, the men and women of the WWE, they get paid, it's up to them to take the taxes out. Which is one reason why historically there have been a few wrestlers who've gotten in trouble for taxes. Not to mention any names here, Ric Flair. There have been a variety of them who've done that. This will now be the responsibility of those companies when they come in. So now let's take a look at a company like WWE. But let's say you're a company that wants to be different. Let's say you want to be slightly different. You don't want to have the problem with Cal. So you make them employees from the get-go. You never even bother saying that they're independent contractors. You say, these are our employees. And you already treat them that way, that you are already prepared to, in every single state you go to, where you perform, to follow by those state laws. Is it possible that some of the other wrestlers out there would start to think that you have a better working environment? Now, I don't want to mention any names, but it's possible that an organization like that, some wrestlers might find to be rather elite. So for us, from a legal aspect, this is an exciting time period because it also gets you a little bit closer to the possibility of unionization. So that's the exciting thing that we're looking at. But now let's talk about the small independent promoter. What is he looking at? Is this going to affect the small independent promoter? Will suddenly these people now be employees? Well, let's go back to the standards. If, for example, you are telling these individuals you are perfectly free to work for anybody, these are the dates I need you for. If you would work those dates, you're fine. On any other date, you can do what you want. That is not going to be an employee. That is most likely going to be an independent contractor. Okay? Because you do not have the full control. So it's one of the things, and I've said this before, every independent contractor, at every single point, for everybody they're using, should all have contracts. I cannot emphasize this enough. They should all have contracts. As a promoter, you might be asking, what should be in my contract with these workers? One, it should clearly state that while you maintain creative control, and you will list the time and the place where the work will take place, that certain particulars of the work will be determined by the employee. So for example, the matches. Who really determines? We know. The booker decides who's going to win, who's going to lose. We know the general direction. But as to what happens within the match, historically, a great deal of creative control was given to the wrestlers. Here's what I need. I need you guys to go in there. I need about 20 minutes. Let's go ahead. I want to make sure we get a nice shine on there on top. Then go ahead, turn around, put heat on them, then about the book. Go ahead, do your thing. Whatever it is that works, make sure draw them in. Once they're ready, then take them on. Got it. It's a lot of space for creative control. Okay, so you're less likely to be an employee. The other thing is, and this is where the wrestlers and promoters should work alike. I'm going to kind of side there off for a moment into the issue of intellectual property. I've seen guys come up with great gimmicks. And by guys, I mean guys and gals, so please try not to be sexist and just using short terms. And then they never trademark it. The fact you have used the gimmick first is extremely important. It is. The fact that you had a logo design first is extremely important. The fact that you have put it first in commerce, if you used it before anybody else did, is important. But the greatest protection you can give it is you must register with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, because then you own it. The WWE does not own the name Samoa Joe. Joe owns it. Which means that when the WWE signed Samoa Joe, part of that agreement, and admittedly I haven't seen the contract, but I'm thinking as a lawyer, part of what needed to happen is that they needed to either lease the rights to use that name for a period of time under the contract, or to get licensed to use it. It's very important. Because having the ability to make a name for yourself that you then walk in and are able to say, look, I would love to sign with you, but let's get one thing clear. I am who I am, and I will own who I am. If you want to use me, this is the name we're going to go with, and it's going to cost you. Now, sometimes it costs us zero, but you at least want it in the agreement that you are licensing the right to use it to them for a period of time. Now, and again, in the WWE contract, that licensing becomes exclusive. They get the exclusive right to license to use your image and to use their name. Anytime you're going to give up anything that is exclusively yours, you must be compensated for it. And that can be money, that can be time, it can be a variety of things. This brings us to the point of your business is like any other business. And I think it's one of the problems that wrestlers have, particularly as you're building up, let's also be honest. When you're starting off and you're building up, you don't have a great deal of negotiating power. You just don't. They come here, they say, look, I'm going to give you a six-figure salary, sign here on the dotted line. And you've been wrestling for ham sandwiches and road money, right? You're going to sit there and go, okay, I'll sign it. But we want to make sure that you go in with as equal a relationship as possible, and part of it is the knowledge. So own your gimmick. The other thing is that if you own your own gimmick, truly own it, then one of the advantages you get to have is when your time comes where you're leaving a larger company, you just walk right back into the gimmick you own. And which you've been able to exploit while you were working with the WWE. And again, I'm using the WWE as an example because they are the 800-pound gorilla. I should also mention as well, just full disclosure, I'm a stockholder in WWE, not enough to have lunch with the demands, but I want to make sure we get the full disclosure out there. And I don't mean to pick on them, except of course that they are so large. And when a case comes down involving what the rules for wrestling are going to be, it is almost certain it's going to be directed at the WWE. Almost certain that's what this case is on. Now again, for a small-time promoter, the other thing you need to remember is this. In your contracts, you should be receiving from your wrestlers the ability to use and exploit their image for a narrow particular point of purposes, for example, promotions. This is a mutually beneficial relationship. For example, Sonny, if I may just use you as an example, if I'm promoting a show, I say, look, Sonny, here's what I want to do. Go ahead and work for us. We're going to give you X number of dates. During those dates, if you go ahead and do them for us, that would be great. We'll do it at this particular rate with possibility of bonuses. Also, something what I want is I want to be able to have the right to use your name and your image for all of my posters, advertising for. This way, by Sonny saying, yeah, I have no problem with that agreement, Sonny still retains all his rights because he has granted to us the ability to promote. When you give up those rights, when you don't do anything to enforce your rights, you then lose those rights eventually. So you have to be careful with it. Several years ago, there was a big argument, and I don't mind giving an example, where there was a filming that was taking place, and I went to the guy who was filming, and I said, you can't film my match. He said, why? I said, because you never permission to. He said, well, I said, look, all you've got to do is just, you sign an agreement, I can write it up right now, authorizing you to go ahead and use me for the filming. It's no problem. He said, well, then I'm not going to put you then it was the videotape. I'm not going to put you on the videotape. Okay, don't put me on the videotape. I didn't care. But Ebony Blade was always going to be used and owned by me, period. Now that's kind of an extreme example, because of course it's not a secret. Wrestling has never been my primary source of income. Okay? But it's all about control. So now, as we said, one of the things, let's go back to what else wrestlers should be looking for. We all know that every time someone signs up for wrestling, there is the form, the waiver form. The waiver form, which essentially says, by the way, if anything goes wrong, you can't blame me. There's only one problem with almost all those waiver forms, because people wonder why I had no problem signing it. Because I could read the waiver form and then look and say, oh, because I know it's not valid. See, how is it not valid? Very simple. If you are a wrestler, and in the process of wrestling, you're performing a move, and in the process of the performance of that move, you then suffer an injury, even though everything else went fine. You as a wrestler will not be able to sue, because there's been an assumption of the risk. It is an inherently dangerous activity you're engaged in. But let's say you go to the top rope to jump. And as you prepare to jump, the top rope buckles under the weight. And you fall. You then break your ankle coming down to the floor. The promoter does not get to say, hey, you signed a waiver. Because it turns out that the equipment was shoddy or it was poorly put together. This is negligence. And under the issue of public policy, you cannot indemnify yourself against your own negligence. So that's one of the reasons too where, and I know it means that there's extra work for you to do, but part of this is if you're going to be successful, then do it right. For promoters, you have to make sure that the people who are putting your rings together, the people who are creating your barriers from the audience, the people who are handling security, all know what the hell they're doing. And if you didn't give them direction, you are running the risk of your own liability, because it would be your negligence. So make sure that you are doing that, because otherwise those waiver protections aren't going to mean anything. Almost always what has happened is almost everybody gets a waiver that is usually found that somebody else used. They get it online. It's the same one that's been used for 15 years. My question is, how come you didn't talk to a lawyer about it? And some people may say, well, I can't afford a lawyer. Then you can't afford to be in business. Just can't. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that you need to pick a lawyer who just happens to have been in business, though it would probably be a smart idea. Okay. www.edalaw.com. Just to give you a small example. But that's part two of what that protection is supposed to mean. Now, let's quickly talk a little bit about, again, we've talked about the wrestling limits. We talked about issues of wrestler liability. And I think as well, this is important, before a match starts and instructions are being given to the crew, and we all know what some of those instructions can be. Look, do not fight outside the ring. Do not sweat. Okay? Do not create your own blood. Do not do it. Every single time there is an instruction that is given, it is extremely important that the workers have to follow that instruction. And if they do not, then what the promotion needs to do is you need to come down hard on the rest of the violator. The question may be why? Well, because if you allow it to go on, you then run the risk as a promoter of being found liable, that your custom and practice was indeed to not provide the safe working environment. So you want to make sure that that isn't a problem. And you can punish them in any way you like, obviously. You can tell them, look, I can't use you on the next 3 shows because I gave an instruction you didn't follow. This teaches people there's a consequence. And it also gives you the chance to be able to show, look, we had a process. And I think that's an instruction you should put on the board too. Almost every promoter will have a set of rules in the back regarding what's going to be allowed tonight and what's not. One of the things you should have up there as well should be the consequences. Consequences could be a fine. Consequences could be a forfeit of pay. Because after all, for the promoter, you're risking your ass here. Do not just rely upon the bonding. The other thing is this. Let's talk about business entities very quickly. I'm a firm believer that every single wrestler out there should be owning their own corporation. Every single one. And that corporation should be related to the character or their business. Now, your question may be, well, geez, Ebony, why would you want to do that? One is, if you're going to be in the business, then treat it like a business. Okay, follow the formalities. For one, you now get to have more control over your IP. Because what happens is you have and by IP I mean intellectual property, your corporation or your LLC or your partnership will be the owner of that particular material. The other thing is that there are numerous tax advantages to being corporations. Right? I'll leave your CPA to discuss that with you, certified professional accountant, we should always be using. But also the same thing should be happening with each of these wrestling companies. Now I want to be clear about how you incorporate too. And I hope I'm not boring you with the minutiae that we're talking about. This is kind of important. Because I came across a promotion that said, hey, I've got a problem. These guys broke away from me and now they're using my company name. And the other company says, yeah, we can do it because we registered as a DBA. And that means doing business as. And I listened, I said, I'm sorry, they did what? They registered as a DBA. So they registered in the city as a DBA. I said, yes. I said, okay. So what do I do? I said, run your shows and use your name. Well, but I guess, no, you can't, trust me. So he goes in, he runs your shows, uses the name. Then the other company sends a cease and desist letter. Not from a lawyer's office, but from them themselves, a cease and desist letter. That letter then winds up in possession of me. I then particularly responded with, dear sirs, thank you for your letter. I received the cease and desist, etc. However, your registration with the DBA does not preclude the incorporation and the registration of the trademark, which took place 7 years ago. Therefore, you can take your cease and desist, shine it up real nice, turn that son of a bitch sideways, and shove it straight up your candy ass. Very truly yours, Eric Darnell Anderson, Esquire. And that's just simple stuff. When you know the rules, you are able to play. I mention this in part because we all love wrestling. We love independent wrestling. But independent wrestling, part of what's making it thrive, when you look at those promotions that are thriving, that are doing better, they're all acting very professionally. Not just in the presentation, how they do things. Capital Wrestling out in DC. Okay, I happen to be there too. Okay, there are a couple other promotions I do legal work for. But I've had a chance to review a variety of contracts out there. And I think that that is one of the differences. Because if you start at the top with the idea of I am a professional and I run a professional company, then you're going to get wrestlers who think I am a professional and I am going to conduct myself like one. Which will also lead, hopefully, to fans who, when they show up, start to think, I am watching professionals do their craft. I am now going to conduct myself in a way that appreciates the professional. Now, are there any questions at this particular point? proceed, I want to talk very quickly just about where the law and wrestling have met historically. This is one of my favorite cases. I don't know if anybody knows this. I know Tom Burke was here a few minutes earlier, and Tom would know this. Is anybody aware that at one particular time, the United States government sued the National Wrestling Alliance? It took place around 1954 and 1957. The strange thing happened. There were promoters who said that they were being blacklisted, and there were wrestlers who were saying they were being blacklisted by members of the National Wrestling Alliance. That the National Wrestling Alliance had become a monopoly. That there were a group of promoters who decided who got what territory, who got to work in those territories, what they could be paid those territories, and that if they didn't follow certain rules, they then had the ability to ban them from working, or to ban them from promoting. All of which was completely true. All of it. So the United States government does an investigation. And during the investigation, fortunately, the NWA president at the time was Sam Munchkin. If you're a wrestling fan and you do not know the name Sam Munchkin, you are seriously lacking in your educational knowledge. Sam Munchkin is one of the most important historical figures you'll ever follow. And Munchkin, who was president of the NWA, had helped put it together, was the leading promoter in St. Louis, which in many ways made him the most important promoter in the country. Munchkin cooperated with the investigators, and he called up the other NWA promoters and he said, cooperate with the investigators. And then when the investigators came, they said, oh, well, apparently there's a problem with our bylaws. And so some of our members have kind of exploited the bylaws, so we'll change our bylaws. Eventually they reached what's called a consent decree. A consent decree is where the government makes an agreement with whoever it is that they're filing complaints against, that they will not proceed in their criminal or civil proceedings so long as this entity or individual follows a set of guidelines. And if they follow those guidelines, everything will be fine. The NWA said, no problem, sir, we will do it. And they signed the consent decree, and then immediately ignored it. And the government never came back. And that is one of the reasons why, from 1954 until about 1983, the NWA remained a gigantic monopoly. It's also one of the reasons why when Vince McMahon started creating a monopoly, the government didn't bother. Because who cared about wrestling? They wanted other things that we know, steroid trials, taxes, those things they like, that's sexy. But they didn't want to deal with the monopoly issue. So now one of the questions I get from people is, can there be a suing for a monopoly now? And the answer to that is unequivocally no. There is no monopoly now. Because first of all, there are no territories. There is competition in each of these places. It's hard to argue now that you have a monopoly when in the same weekend you can have the WWE performing at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, and you can have New Japan and ROH performing at Madison Square Garden. So from a legal standpoint, there is no monopoly. And from a fan standpoint, I have to tell you now, this is the most exciting time period to be a wrestling fan since the highlight of the territories. Tom, I was just a few minutes ago telling him about the case of the United States versus National Wrestling Alliance.
Okay, in the 50s.
That's right, in the 50s. So we were just talking about that. And we're also pointing out again how there was the consent decree, and then the NWA then promptly ignored the very consent decree they made. And that the government really never came back at it. So, I find that fun. And the reason I find that fun is this, because I think that I've often said that everything in life I needed to know I learned from pro wrestling. And that I've used it in my legal career over and over again. And so I find it very fascinating when we read about these accounts of where the law and wrestling have intermingled. Let me give you another example, which to me is kind of funny. The WWE has become really a pioneer in figuring out ways to destroy the rights of other people.
Destroy the what again?
The rights of other people. And here's what I mean by that. It used to be that if you were in a promotion and they gave you a gimmick and you left, you kept the gimmick. Okay? When Dick Bader was the destroyer in LA, any place else he went, he got to still be the destroyer. Nobody said, wait a minute, I created that. You don't get to go anywhere with it, it has to stay here. All of that changed with the WWE. That they have gone ahead and exerted their control over intellectual property. Now again, from a business standpoint, it's very sensitive. Which is why you now have to ask yourself, independent promoters and independent wrestlers, who created the gimmick that you're using? Who owns it? Let's say, for example, that somewhere there's someone who came up with the idea of the name Kofi Kingston. Does the WWE own that, or does the original person who came up with the idea own that? And if it was done in a promotion with Kofi Sarkazi Mendoza, if it was done in conjunction with that, does that promotion own it? Now it doesn't matter, you've got the registered trademark, but you could have someone who turns around and fight. You start to see where this can be convoluted, and where it can start to be confusing, which is why it is best to always have these agreements in place with an understanding. I think that as you start to see this rise, I still to this day find it completely insulting. I mean, I really do. Insulting and terrible, but the idea that Cody Runnels cannot use the name Cody Rhodes. And there really is no other way to describe it. That is just the company being a prick. At least that's the legal term that we use, is prick. Because the idea that this individual, and their argument of course is, well, he never used the name Cody Rhodes before he was here in the WWE. The idea that somebody would not be able to use a name created by the family. Because as we learned in world-class championship wrestling, you can't just stick the name Von Erich on it and have it fly. Okay. It would help if you were actually related to Jack Atkinson. Then it would have helped. So it's not like they're going to turn around and suddenly create another Cody Rhodes. They can't do it. So it's ownership for the sake of money, greed, etc. And it doesn't need to happen. And that just would not have happened 30, 40 years ago. Today we see that it happens. So I think that while we don't want to give promoters and wrestlers too many things to think about, it is important, particularly for those, let's face it, there's various levels of talent on these independent scenes. Various levels. There's some people where it's like, look, I'm a weekend warrior and I'm happy being a weekend warrior and I want to be a weekend warrior for as long as I can and I'm fine. Others out there who say, well, maybe I want to pursue this as a career, so I'm going to keep my day job and keep working this at the same time, see where it goes. And then you have the others who are, one way or another, I'm going to make my living doing this. I don't care if I have to starve today, I'll do it to make millions later. And because there's several different levels, that means you're dealing with several different kind of legal issues in the long term. So it's important to contemplate and think about all of those things as you're developing and growing. And I think that one of the things that we need to start doing, both as wrestling companies and as wrestlers, is thinking about, okay, what kind of environment are we creating? Is it just cheap or is it professional? And I think that that's one of the things that you need to develop and work on by covering these issues. Now, let me give a final word about fans. Now, there's some things about fans that should be obvious. Number one, don't jump in the ring. Everybody knows this, right? Don't jump in the ring, don't touch the wrestlers, because there are a variety of issues. Now, one of the issues that people worry about is, and we saw this at the WWE Hall of Fame ceremony, right? For some reason, some guy thinks it is a good idea to enter a hall filled with professional wrestlers, of whom are not of an average size, we should mention. Several of them are quite large. And several of them know how to fight. So we have a situation in which this individual decides, I'm going to jump into this mock ring, and I'm going to attack one of the most beloved figures within the wrestling community, Rhode. I don't know what he thought the end game was going to be, but he did. And what proceeds to happen is what we call as well. Everybody jumps into the ring. Everybody pulls him out, and a couple of wrestlers take shots at him. So the question I was getting all the time, as you may figure, I often will get these kind of calls about, hey, what does this mean? What does this mean? Hey, is it possible that that some of those WWE guys are going to get charged or sued because they hit that guy? Let me give you the answers. Number one, odds they're going to get charged, very low. Odds they're going to get sued, possible. Odds that they will lose the lawsuit, next to zero. Next to zero. And let me explain to you why. First, from a legal standpoint, the individual has now committed a trespass. You are allowed to use reasonable physical force to remove a person from committing a trespass. A trespass is an unlawful entry onto a premises or property. The person had no permission, now they may say, well, I had a ticket. Yes, the ticket tells you to sit your ass in the seat. It did not tell you to move beyond that. So, trespass, reasonable force, no charges. Now, what about when they physically grabbed him after he attacked Bret Hart? Bret Hart, who, by the way, it's well known has had a variety of medical issues, thanks to a stroke and a few other things, right? So one could argue Bret is now vulnerable. He's 61 years old. He's not the hitman out there at WrestleMania 10. That's not what's happening. So it is a defense of another. You're allowed to use physical force, up to and including deadly force, in order to protect an individual. The same rights that you had to protect yourself, you can use to somebody else. So to restrain the individual, if they went in there and they started throwing punches, all of that is fine. Now, let's talk about, if you saw the video, they are escorting him out. As they're escorting him out, I believe it's Teddy. Teddy turned around and punched him. Teddy Smith punched him. What was that? Was it Harry? Okay. Okay. I know one of his nephews throws the punch. Now, at that point, the gentleman is restrained. Bret is nowhere near him. The punch, arguably, was an illegal punch. The danger had passed and there's no reason to punch. So you thought maybe, okay, so then why would they charge him? This is where experience comes in. Our thought is, you find me 6 or 12 people in a jury box who, after seeing that tape, would convict any of the wrestlers for punching that guy. You won't find it. And that is sometimes where the technical and the realities have to come into place. And that's the way it is for any kind of lawsuit, just like almost any match. Just because you can do a thing doesn't necessarily mean you should do a thing. Yes, I can go ahead and do a triple somersault off the top rope onto somebody's shoulder. When I say I mean somebody else, theoretically, not me. I mean, I get a hernia if I imagine that in my dreams. So yeah, I can do a triple somersault off the top rope. I can then go ahead and do a hurricanrana and throw that guy into the table that's right there on the side. Okay, you can do it, but it doesn't necessarily mean you should do it in the first 2 minutes of the match. Same thing applies with all lawsuits. We examine sometimes, merely because the legal right is there doesn't necessarily mean it's something that should be pursued. So, we already know this factor about the fans. You know not to touch anybody because it's not going to end well for you. But some of the other things kind of to worry about is your intellectual property. The intellectual property of each of these companies. Are you going to these shows and are you holding up your phone and are you recording? And if you're recording, what are you doing? Are you getting it on for your own personal use? Are you putting it on YouTube? If you're putting it on YouTube, how are you putting it on YouTube? In a 12-minute match, are you showing the whole 12 minutes? Or are you showing 2? If you're showing the whole 12 minutes, then the promotion arguably has reason to believe that you, quite frankly, are screwing them out of their money. They're like, we can't exploit it because you've already put it out on the internet for free. And people aren't going to come to shows because they're expecting people like you to go ahead and record this and then go ahead and put it up. Again, for free. But if you were to go to a company and you were to say, look, here's what I'd like to do. I want to go ahead and record some of the match, but I only want to put on about 90 seconds. Do I have your permission to do that? There's nothing wrong with that. The company can say no, they can say yes. Because the company would then benefit by having 90 seconds of a good match showing up. But again, this is an issue of ask. And for companies, I would tell you now, if people are recording and you are allowing it to happen, then it's your own damn fault when your product gets out there. You need to tell people, during the matches, no recording. None. This is my legal advice to you. Let me rephrase that, because I have to be technical. Legal advice costs money, but I'm telling you now is free. So this is a point to ponder. Right? So we'll leave it at that point. Now, very quickly, I want to talk about merchandising. Merchandising goes back to the whole trademark issue, the ability to exploit what you do. Some of you may have seen me a couple days ago. The New England law firm, we have Sin Lawyers, and I'm also running around in a hat that says Sin Lawyers on it. Because we want the logo out there, we want the branding out there, we want to be able to use it. And I think sometime this year we're going to start selling our own merchandise based on Sin Lawyers, which I think the bar may or may not have a problem with. We'll find that out after we do it. But part of this too belongs with, if you are taking your gimmick and you are exploiting it in any way, shape, or form, you strengthen your claim. So I would tell you, once you've created the gimmick, one, trademark it. Well, the first thing is, don't tell anybody about it. Trademark it first. Because you tell someone your idea, there's always a chance they're going to steal the idea. Yeah. So go ahead, trademark it first, then start using it on merchandise. And even if you're not making money with the merchandise, you then have a legitimate claim of, hey, not only did I put my name out there, I put my logo out there, I put my image, I put all of that out there. The other thing is, you can then exploit it for something else. Let's say you get big in wrestling. Okay? Well, pseudo big. And then your career ends. You want to still be able to exploit your knowledge, right? Abdul the Butcher has exploited the name Abdul the Butcher to do what? Right? Lots of money doing what? Who's been to Atlanta? Who's been there? Okay, Tom, what's in Atlanta?
What, say again?
What does Abdullah have in Atlanta?
Money.
That's right, the House of Ribs.
House of Ribs. Yeah.
That's right.
This was just sold.
Oh, that's right. Is that used right? I mean, come on.
Abdul's House of Ribs.
That's right. What's House of Ribs?
Yeah. Huh.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Always working that name. Mean Gene Hamburger. And Mean Gene got screwed on that deal, by the way.
Oh, the hamburger?
Oh, yeah, the hamburger deal they had. But again, if you're able to go ahead and have it and use it and exploit it, you can then turn around and use that name for almost anything else you want to do. Wrestling can use you, or you can use wrestling. Which one do you want it to be? Okay. So I think that's one of the most important things we want to plan. So, let's see, as we reach almost the point, I don't know if there's going to be a series of questions. Let's quickly review. One is the exciting time we have in wrestling right now. On the legal landscape, there's the distinct possibility that we're going to see an entire change in the employment relationship between the wrestlers and their promotions. Particularly if one of those promotions decides we're going to provide all these things and we're going to let them unionize. If that happens, the floodgates open. Two, the second thing is talking as well about making sure that you own what you've created and how wrestling companies and wrestlers should be doing this. Three, making sure that you understand the relationship between independent contractors and employees by having an understanding by using more written agreements. Okay. And again, if you need help with that, call us. We'll be more than happy to go and help you. We do it for a variety of promotions. Okay. Obviously, four is discussed as well, making sure as well that the fans are aware of what their legal responsibilities and rights are also. I've got to tell you, one of the things that I've always found just completely fascinating is if wrestling is a storytelling business, so is the law. It's a storytelling business. And watching the two combine over the years, I've always said you can relate anything you want to wrestling. I was writing a blog for a while. I had to stop because I just got too busy. But feel free to go check it out because we may write again or we may start doing video blogs on there called wrestlingwiththe.law.com. And one of the things we talk about is we talk about where the law would play out regarding certain things. Like one of the things that happens on the WWE that drives me crazy, just up the wall, is this one. The GM comes around and says, that's it. You're going to have a match at the end of Raw tonight for the championship. Whatever the hell it is. Right? He has now ordered a match between these two people. Why can he order that? Because they're employees. Okay. Where it gets interesting is this. 3 weeks later, we're going to have a contract signing for the championship match at WrestleMania. Well, let's think about this for a moment. What do you need to sign a contract for if you can just order the match? What is it? What's the contract supposed to say? What's the bonus? Is there a bonus? What's the payoff? Is there a payoff? These are things that I just think that once you go down a particular road, you have to come up with things that make sense. And it's not hard to fill that out. Because the lawyer in me sits there and goes, Jesus Christ, just stop. Okay, just stop. The other thing, of course, is what? Every now and then somebody gets arrested on a wrestling show, right? My God, Becky Lynch is being arrested. My God, Stone Cold being arrested. And you have to ask yourself, well, what about the attack in the locker room? Because that's a battery. Nobody was arrested for that. You know, so it'd be great to watch them do things that are consistent. And I know for the lawyer in me will sometimes you'll say, okay, well, it's got to follow and make sense. And sometimes you go, well, it's all fake anyway. No, just because it is a storyline does not mean that it shouldn't make sense. Okay? It has to make sense. You have to remember, because when I was in law school, I actually had a professor in our torts class. And for those who don't know tort, it's not just those little French pastries. Tort is a French term for to harm, hence the name torture. So tort deals all about all of these things that are harms. And one of those things obviously would deal with assaults, batteries, etc. And in torts class, we would often use a clip from professional wrestling to show a particular tort, which I've always found entertaining and fascinating, so I've tried to keep up the same thing. So for instance, one of the things I've written about in Wrestling with the Law was, for those of you who are too young to remember, years ago there was a great angle involving Larry Zbyszko selling the national title to Killer Tim Brooks for $25,000. The WWE would later use that exact same angle later on when they had Andre the Giant sell the WWE title to Ted DiBiase. And I found it interesting, sitting there thinking, well wait, who owns the championship? So I do a legal analysis of it. Who owns what? What's representation? If you want to ask me about the analysis, I'll be happy to answer that question in a few minutes. Another great example to me was the wonderful, again, the national heavyweight title, let's see, back in Georgia, where Tommy Rich wrestles Ted DiBiase. He loses, it's a loser-lose wrestling match, and suddenly a guy shows up in Georgia, a little blonde hair sticking out of his mask using the name Mr. R. Ted DiBiase is swearing, it's Tommy Rich, it's Tommy Rich, it's Tommy Rich. And that's it, you know, and Mr. R saying, no, it's not, I'm not Tommy Rich. Then finally they have this match on national television, and during the match, as they're wrestling, suddenly Gordon Soley says, wow, this was unexpected, hello, and here is Tommy Rich. Hi there, Gordon, how you doing? Hell of a match, isn't it there, Gordon? Suddenly DiBiase turns, he sees Tommy Rich, he's like, what the hell? He goes ahead and he takes the mask off of Mr. R, it's Brad Armstrong. He's looking over at Tommy Rich, and then suddenly what happens is Brad Armstrong sneaks up behind him, schoolboys, and 1, 2, 3, Brad Armstrong, new national heavyweight champion. And I did a legal analysis about the angle, let's talk about this. Does Ted DiBiase have a claim that he should have never lost the national title because the person he was wrestling was not the person he was supposed to wrestle? So we do an analysis of that, and I think that's kind of fun, and we're happy to do it for a variety of reasons. So with that, I want to thank you very much. I hope that there are questions of any kind related to the legal industry or look at angles throughout history from a legal analysis, because it's not that hard to fill in the gaps to make them make sense. I greatly appreciate it, and also, as we said before, you can follow us on Twitter at Eric Anderson Law, and you can also see us on the old blog, wrestlingforlaw.com, and our own website, edalaw.com. With that, we thank you very much. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
I'm wondering, going back to the 80s, before Vince, kind of created a monopoly, I guess when you first were talking, I was thinking that if the territories from Florida up to the West Coast, up to the Northwest, Midwest, it just seems a shame, because to me that was wrestling at its purest, and it's just the best for me. And then along he comes, and I don't know if it's as simple as there was nothing legal to prevent him from going down to Georgia wrestling or Florida championship wrestling, and to do that, because in the end I just feel like, I'm in my late 50s, so I might be showing my age, but I'm just thinking that wrestling is not only nothing like what I grew up with it. I mean, there's no way I can sit down and watch Monday Night Raw for 3 hours, because number one, there's very little wrestling. For every hour of programming, you might get, 10, 15 minutes of wrestling. Plus, I don't think the characters are there. I don't think they have any Hulk Hogan's, Bruno's, Pedro's, people, Ric Flair. And I don't know, I just wondered about that, but I think as you started, when I walked in speaking about that there was nothing to prevent Vince McMahon or anyone else to go along and buy out all these promotions.
Well, this is actually the irony. The irony is that when Vince is doing his growth nationally, Vince is actually breaking up the monopoly. That's the irony. The irony is that when Vince goes into Florida, when he refuses to recognize the territorial agreement that had been made by the promoters for the last, at that point, 30, 40 years, he is actually preventing the monopoly. What no one was keeping track of was the realization that what Vince was also doing at the same time was replacing one monopoly with another. Because what Vince did that was inappropriate was locking up the agreements with different venues. And the other thing is, the deal he made with the cable companies, it was brilliant, it was great for the company, but it was completely ridiculous to sit there and say, look, either you're going to carry, if you carry this NWA, this Crockett Promotion pay-per-view, you are not going to get WrestleMania. Was he bluffing? Yes, he was. Because there was no way he was going to turn down pay-per-view money. But it worked. And he was able to intimidate them, which of course wound up hurting Crockett. Not that Crockett didn't make their own mistakes, but that was one thing that was a huge problem for them. Is that so the irony is that he's breaking the monopoly to then replace it with something else. And unfortunately, because wrestling for so long had been kind of this side business that people did, the only reason why they came after the NWA in the 50s was because there were so many complaints from these promoters and these wrestlers. And once they stopped complaining, the thought was, well, who cares? It's just wrestling. They were, remember, now we know what a big industry it can be. Back then, people weren't paying attention to how big it was. You know, we mentioned one reason the NWA got away with everything is, let's think about it for a moment. In Dallas, Fritz von Erich was not just a very popular man, he was a powerful man. Sam Muncher was extremely powerful in St. Louis. Donald was very powerful in Portland. Okay, Jack Pfeiffer was powerful. All these guys were powerful because they were also members of the community. They ingratiated themselves with the business community and with law enforcement, and ingratiated themselves with school boards and communities so that when they made a phone call, it got picked up. And that's how they were able to get away with it for so long. One of the reasons the NWA folded is because there was no replacement for those guys.
Right.
There was no replacement for Sam Muncher, right off the bat. So it was only a matter of time for everything else fell through. Okay, there was no replacement for Eddie. Okay, there was no replacement for the honorable agreement. And when that happened, it's only a matter of time before they fell. And what Vince saw was, and look, he's not the only one who saw it. Okay, the Briscoes saw it. Okay, they saw it, and God knows, Jim Barnett, my boy. Jim Barnett saw it. You know, and they figured that out and then went in there. The sad thing is there are other people who saw it too, but didn't jump on it. I mean, frankly, Fritz could have killed them immediately if he'd gone ahead and gone national first. Okay, whether or not it would last was a whole other story. But he had the storyline, he had the look, he had the talent. You know, his talent was based upon all guys who were all in their 20s, a fast physical stuff. He could have got away with it. So I mean, that's what it is. Was there another question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so you had touched upon when a fan puts their hands on talent.
Yes.
What about in cases where you have, I mean, New Japan, normally most of the shows are in Japan, but if they come to the United States or some of these indie federations, they're you got guys flipping into the front row, or like we have organizations around here that have fans bring the weapons match and stuff like that. I mean, if there's not some sort of legalese on a ticket stub or posted or something, are they exposing themselves to a lot of liability there?
God, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because one of the things is, for example, there's an issue right now in Major League Baseball about whether or not they need to add more netting along the field lines because foul balls are hitting people. And on the one hand, you can say, look, a foul ball could be hit in that area, maybe you shouldn't bring your 6-year-old kid to that place, go get a seat in the bleachers. But when that happens, that's an accident. Okay, that's just a part of the game. If you, in a wrestling match, if someone is leaping from the middle of the ring into the 3rd row, that's not an accident. You decided to do that. So I think the exposure is tremendous. And it's one of the reasons why people need to make sure they're bonded, and that's one of the reasons why you need to keep it to a minimum. And why you need to have security ready. You need to have security ready to be able to say, go to that area. So that just before that happens, you've got security being able to, and maybe it's a quick signal, which gives you, move, get those people out of the way as much as possible so the spot can then happen. Okay? And of course you want to do it in a way that doesn't expose everything. But you do want to show select security. I think they may come here, you got to move, whatever it is it takes. But yeah, I think that too many people have really exposed themselves to greater liability than they're ever going to want. And the weapons match thing, I mean, fans bring the weapons. Well, what happens if the fans start using the weapons on themselves? Yeah, what if they're using it on each other, which is a distinct possibility? You're liable. You run the risk. Let me see if I get this straight. So you told a whole bunch of people that what they should do is bring frying pans, irons, garbage pails, pitchforks, and God knows what else to a wrestling match? Yes. And then they use them on each other? Yes. And you didn't see this as a possibility? Well, no. Were you serving beer? Well, yes. Okay? The problem with suing independent promotions, though, is that they don't have any money. Yeah, so it's, but the other thing is that if you're an independent promotion and you're not incorporated, guess what they get to come after? Your personal assets. Which is why we tell everybody, incorporate. that they will come right, and once you incorporate, I gotta make this, once you incorporate, make sure you understand that you and the business are separate. There's the business's money and there's your money. On occasion, for example, I pay myself from my firm's salary. And if I use the firm funds to pay off a credit card, I then immediately, when my salary comes up, that's removed because I now must reimburse the firm. Now the firm has one owner, it's me. The firm and I are, in many ways, are one. But for every purpose, for legal reasons, we keep all of that stuff separate. So that we don't do what's called piercing the corporate veil, because that's where you'll get hurt. You'll get hurt a lot. So it's like, it seems odd that I have to reimburse myself. I'm not reimbursing myself, I'm reimbursing the company for the money that they pay off me. And if I don't do it, I then have to count that payoff as salary. And I know it sounds like work, but my question is, if you're going to be involved in any business you're going to run, it takes work. You've got to do the little things. And I think that that's a wonderful point, and that goes back to the same issue of training. If you're not training the people who are going to be working your security, if you're not training the people who are going to be working your ring, then you shouldn't be in the business. Other questions? Yes, right here, and then I'll take Tom.
Yeah, hi. In a situation like Lucha Underground, where it's filmed in advance, and then they can't compete for a while, why can't these wrestlers get some sort of unemployment or some compensation? It's almost like they're hostage. I mean, is there any legal help for those guys?
Well, you see, you're back to the other problem. Problem number one is they're independent contractors. Is kind of the name. And I haven't seen a Lucha Underground contract, but I've spoken to people who are under it. And I can't say who, but at least two have talked to me about how you go ahead and break the contract. Because their contract is ridiculous. The idea of being able to lock people out for that. So what you do is you sue. You sue it based upon what are the consequences. But the problem for people always is suing takes time. And it can take money. Sometimes you have to be really bold. One of the bold things you can do is just break the contract. And then say, fine, you sue me. And then we'll go to court, and then we'll make the argument as to why this was a nefarious contract that should be negated.
From a legal standpoint, I mean, you said it's a ridiculous contract.
Yeah, because it is inherently unfair to be locked up, but the other thing is that it's a TV show. That's something to remember about Lucha Underground. It is unabashedly a TV show, more than it's a wrestling promotion. And it is not unusual in the TV industry to lock people up on contracts. But that's also what's called the pay or play. Okay, either we're going to do this recording, we're going to do these tapings, or you're going to pay me money for having to sit out and not take other jobs. Okay, and that's what should have been negotiated, and I don't think it was. Yes, Tom?
New York State recently, within the last year, maybe a year and a half, implemented strong regulations through their athletic commissions in the state of New York. And they have to have a doctor present, an ambulance, etc. Friends of mine from the local area here went to Utica, New York. There was no doctor present. The commissioner canceled the show.
No.
Are other states still going to that mode, do you know, or strict athletic commissions?
It's going to depend. I know in California, pro wrestling isn't regulated by the state athletic commission anymore. And I don't think they are in Massachusetts either.
No, we don't have anything.
Yeah, they don't have anything.
We used to.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody used to.
Yeah.
But then it all broke away. And again, the problem with some of the state athletic commissions really were the commissioners weren't really commissioners. They were political appointees, they were cronies, and so whatever the promotions want, whoever controlled that area, they got. And they worried more about regulating boxing, and even then, as we know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that regulating was, it's right up there with Ted DiBiase's winter residence in the Netherlands Antilles, or with the tournament where Pat Patterson was in the Intercontinental title. Most of it's fictional as far as the regulating goes. And I don't think you're going to see a lot of widespread. What's going to be the issue is if you see more injuries of a substantial number, or you see more people dying in the ring, then yeah, you're going to see that. And we're back again to the other issue of if you're going to be in the business, then go ahead and do it properly. I think one of the problems we have too often is there are people who get involved and then don't have anything. I hate to give this example. But many of you may recall Dan Quirk, Spider. And I was on the show where Spider died. And I left before his match. He said goodbye. And I got the call about 45 minutes later about what had happened. There was no medical personnel there at all. Now, I'm not saying it would have saved his life. I don't know. But the fact is that at a place where, and two great examples are, Jerry Lawler has a heart attack, right? Medical personnel is there instantly. Instantly. And they're able to get some kind of care. So I think for those people who want to be in those places, that's just the cost of business. You're going to have to do it. But I think everybody should be doing it as a general good practice. Just as a general good practice for the safety of everybody involved, spend the money to have medical technicians there. Fine, so you have to cut out some of the matches. Shoot, we don't need 10 match nights anyway. I mean, talking, suddenly those of us who are older, we can recall where a long night was 6 matches.
Sometimes 4.
Yeah, exactly, sometimes 4. And the 4 usually was going to go, might be a 45 to 60 minute problem. Okay? So, you make the changes where you need to, as opposed to copying what you've seen, creating your own product. And I think that part of the way of avoiding liability is go the extra mile. And if it means you can't do it so your promotion falls by the wayside, survival of the fittest. Next question. All right, thank you all very much. Thank you.